Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am your host, Rupert, and today I am both delighted and excited to be joined by Austin King, who, of course, is the co-founder of Omni Network and a computer scientist graduating from Harvard. Also, somebody that sold a company successfully to Ripple in the early days. And I believe you also worked at Ripple. Is that correct, Austin?
Yep. Yeah. I spent a year, we built the Interledger network, and I spent a year integrating it into Ripple's payment product suite after they bought the company.
Fantastic. And I'm sure we're going to get into that and some of the experiences that you took away from it and maybe Ripple more broadly in their role in tomorrow's world. But before I do that, I always like to start with my guests with a little bit about themselves and how you kind of first got interested in the cryptocurrency space. And if there was an aha moment for you. I know I had many, starting with Bitcoin. I think Chainlink was a big one for me when I kind of realized you can use a DLT to incentivize accurate data and kind of solve an issue there. But what was your kind of introduction into the crypto space, and was there any aha moments?
Yeah, so I was still a student at Harvard at this point in time. And honestly, a lot of people obviously get into crypto downstream of the like speculation side. People like making money. Everybody likes making money. And so I actually got involved more from the computer science perspective. I started learning and like teaching myself how to program on different blockchains. And I remember I built an application that was like a voting based application. And obviously the technology still has like a substantial like maturation journey ahead of it. But at this point in time, it was very, very immature. This was like, I believe 2016, 2017. And I built this application and it just kind of clicked to me. I was like, we're going to run governments on these things. Like, this is just like, obviously, you can just like track people's like individual votes here. Like, we're seeing a toy version of what this will become. And so, honestly, I was pilled ever since then. And then, I started investing and losing all my money after that. But it actually came from like programming originally.
No, it's nice to sort of talk to someone that was kind of, I guess, in it for the tech. That's a kind of buzzword or a buzz phrase that gets thrown around. I think for myself, it was really more from a speculative point of view. Like yourself, lost probably quite a lot of money in 2017, really
Yeah.
2018, or
I made a
fallout.
lot and then I lost a lot. Yeah.
I think all of us share that journey, and then you kind of
Yeah.
learn. And I think through that, then you have to take an interest in markets. With Bitcoin, you have to take an interest in money, and then you sort of start
Yeah.
to um, sort of form this picture that really kind of fits into place in regards to what this technology is going to do. And it's very interesting that you talk about enabling or creating a protocol or coming up with a kind of voting mechanism harnessing DLT, because
Mhm.
that really is something that we're yet to still see. I mean, we're seeing it with the likes of polymarkets, perhaps, which was a great
Mhm.
invention. Um,
Yeah.
Governments will use this technology. What's your kind of thinking on that? Do you think we're going to see the future voting systems on chain?
Yeah, I do think that, and I mean, we're seeing this with the U.S. administration right now. Like, Elon is running Doge, and he said that he wants to put the U.S. Treasury on a blockchain. And I wouldn't even say I'm in it for the tech. There's definitely, maybe most of my brain is like engineering brain, and I am fascinated by the technology. It's really interesting to think about these different problems. But I'm actually in it for just like how this technology is going to impact human society. That's like why I do what I do. And fundamentally, it gives people more freedoms. It gives them sovereignty over their finances. And I think that's just like fundamentally good. And so that's why I do everything that I do. But where do like I think we're at in the journey of this? Uh, right now, honestly, I think it's very good timing that the US administration is kind of like fully reversing its prior hostile stance and embracing this new technology because now we're at a point, where a majority of transactions that you can make across any of these new blockchains are nearly instantaneous and nearly free. And so the technology has kind of gone through this journey where, there was a lot of work put in over the past, 8 years that I've been involved to get to that point. But we're there now. And that really opens up this wider array of use cases where it's like, okay, can we vote using this technology? You can do that now, and the transaction fees are going to be low enough that it's actually like reasonable to do something like that. Whereas, just a few years ago, something like that wasn't super practical. So I do think that we're at a point. I like to describe it as like leaving the casino. Obviously, most of it so far has been very like speculative based, and like it's a casino in many ways. But the technology has matured to a point that we can expand past the casino type use cases. And that's happening when the US government is now embracing this technology. So, my perspective is in the next 2 years, more is going to happen than has happened in the past 8 years.
Yeah, no, I mean it's truly fascinating. And in regards to where we're at right now, I know I was listening to a variety of other podcasts that you had done in preparation for this. I know you'd shared a story about unstaking something on Ethereum and just how much that cost.
Yeah. I yeah. I'm pretty sure the most I've ever paid for one transaction was about $550, maybe 600. And that was what from a functional perspective, what I was doing is I was withdrawing money from a savings account and it
Yeah,
somehow cost that much money. So yeah, like very different times. Things have matured substantially since then, and thank God, because that obviously is absurd.
I remember giving my accountant sort of the transactions or what had taken place in my MetaMask, and I can share your pain
Yeah.
entirely. Not only was she already confused enough about everything, but to sort of throw that in there, she didn't really understand. It was quite an interesting interaction because she kind of went like, "Hang on, is
Yeah.
this not supposed to be the future?" And it's
Yeah.
more way more expensive. And that was unstaking something that
Yeah.
was a kind of protocol built on Ethereum. But we've come a long way, and we're getting to Ethereum more broadly.
Mhm.
Let's touch on some of your experiences and your sort of success in regards to selling your first company to Ripple. Could you maybe tell us about the story behind all of that
Mhm.
and what you learned?
Yeah, I learned a lot. Anytime you go to build a company, you're going to mess things up constantly. But the good part about that is hopefully you learn from those experiences. So I messed up a lot in my first company, but I also learned a lot in my first company. And so really what happened here is I was still at Harvard at this point in time. I was committed to building a crypto company. Like my senior year, I did not interview at like Facebook or any of these companies. I always wanted to build a company. And once I discovered crypto, I was like, I'm building a crypto company. And so I actually met the Ripple research team, and they were focused on the Interledger protocol at this point in time. But it was just kind of a design; it wasn't a network. And so the clear gap in this ecosystem was somebody needed to create like production grade infrastructure and like really run it at scale for people who wanted to participate in the network. And so that's the gap that we filled. We really were the ones that came in, and we had this like there were white papers and designs and like some initial like reference implementations for how Interledger would work. We were the ones that took that and turned it like business grade so that different people that were participating in the network could actually rely on Interledger and it would work at like a level that a business can depend on it. And it was very just kind of like originally research level. So we did that for just under 2 years and it scaled up pretty quickly. We processed 10 billion payments before Ripple decided to acquire us in late 2019. And yeah, honestly, learned a ton, a lot on the engineering side as well as on the like business side. That definitely influences a lot of how I think about Omni today.
Yeah, no, very interesting. I'm really excited to sort of dive into to Omni in a lot more detail. Sticking on the kind of topic of Ripple and perhaps XRP, it's very apparent to me, and I know I mentioned it off camera briefly, that there's a kind of renaissance in finance taking place, a renaissance with value and how we use and interact with it more broadly, and this kind of internet of value that's being enabled with the cryptocurrency space, with DLTs. What are your thoughts as a kind of broad overview in regards to what Ripple's doing, what perhaps the XRP token is enabling, and the impactful nature of it all? Because it seems like a grand undertaking to me that you'll perhaps be far more adept at sort of talking about than myself. So I'd love to get your take on all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the unique and special spot that XRP and Ripple occupy in the crypto industry is there really haven't been any other crypto platforms that have leaned so heavily into like actually embracing the traditional financial system and looking for ways that this new technology can improve that. Most platforms, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, the energy is far more like forget what we have had in the past. We're going to create something fundamentally new and we're going to be on our own little island. That's never really been the strategy for XRP and Ripple. They far more have kind of leaned into like, how can we use this technology to upgrade the existing financial system? Where it's been 12 years now since the ledger was originally launched, and obviously they've really leaned heavily into payments. And so my perspective on kind of where this is going is they have used their payment products to develop relationships with financial institutions across the world over the past decade. Kind of the next stage of this though is tokenization. And if you read between the lines and you're watching interviews with like David Schwartz and Brad and stuff, you'll see that they clearly are thinking about this very deeply. They're onboarding other like tokenized assets onto XRP Ledger even today. But the way that the world will look in the future with XRP Ledger is it's not going to just be payments. It's really going to be the intersection between traditional finance and like this on-chain technology that can improve how these businesses are functioning at large. So I think a lot of people think it's just about payments, and that's no longer the case. That really was like a beachhead strategy to go develop all these different relationships. What they're trying to do now is nurture those relationships so that they can like tokenize these financial assets, put them on the XRP ledger, and really deepen their business relationships. So that's one thing that I think a lot of the XRP community doesn't really fully understand yet, but it's pretty clear if you look at their like recent product releases, like RLUSD. Like RLUSD is just a tokenized fiat currency. Like a lot of people don't think about stablecoins as like tokenized assets, but that's what they are, and like that's really like one of the first steps that they're taking in this direction.
Yeah, I think stable coins, and it is just opinion, and I'm going to come to your opinion in just a second, are the kind of evolution of money. You know, if you look at the printing press, that really enabled kind of banknotes. And then if you look at the internet, we have digital currency now, but the kind of evolution of that, I guess, is to tokenize the current sort of fiat standard and actually put that on chain and make it far more efficient and make the transference of money as seamless as it is perhaps to for me and you to send a message to one another, or kind of enable this internet of value. Do you think that stable coins or crypto enabled currencies, it could be CBDCs, are the evolution of money broadly? Because that is massive. You know, how often do you get to see money evolve in this manner? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think that the role of money is changing fundamentally. So if you zoom out and think about like why do we have money? Like that's a good question to kind of like ground this
It's a
in.
great
Like
question.
yeah, like we have money because it makes it easier to, engage in commerce and transact with other people, and we don't have to like barter or do loans. Um, Having said that, though, there's kind of like a lot of people hold money today, even though governments print more of it, and the value of it goes down just because it makes transacting easier. Where we're heading, though, is it's going to get to a point where nobody's going to have like checkings or savings account. Even the distinction between those two is actually a really good example of this. Is why is there a difference between a savings account and a checking account? Like one gives you a higher interest, but they're both just boxes in your bank. Like it's like kind of arbitrary if you really think about it. And so where I think we're going in regards to like money at large is that people actually primarily are just going to like hold their savings in something that they want to hold it in. And we're going to remove all that friction of just paying for things. So it'll get to a point where I can just hold 100% of all my money in Apple stock and pay for things when I go buy and coffee. And that's going to be possible because a lot of people talk about these like open networks. That is true, but one of the most important things here is that they're programmatic. And so, when I am transacting, a swap can happen in the middle of that. So I'm not going to be forced to hold some fiat currency that is depreciating all the time just to buy a coffee. I'm going to be able to hold whatever assets that I want to. So I do think the role of money is fundamentally changing at large. But I do think that a stepping stone in the direction of like maybe disintermediating like fiat currencies at large is stablecoins. And I think this is a huge opportunity for the United States. I'm actually really excited and proud, honestly, that we are not doing a central bank digital currency and that we're letting businesses do this. I think a lot of people, in a very justified way, have concerns about a central bank digital currency and the control that that would give the government over people. So I do think that this is one of the biggest opportunities from a like financial strategic perspective for the United States today, and I do think we are going to see the stablecoin sector grow orders of magnitude, in the coming years here. Like some people have been talking about stablecoin market cap hitting $3 trillion just in the next few years. Honestly, I don't feel like that's a crazy thing to say. Like it feels pretty reasonable if we just map out kind of the growth rates that we're seeing right now.
Certainly, if they are going to use stable coins to, we've heard David Sachs, we've heard Scott Bessent talk about how they are going to use. They've literally said this, stable coins to bring down interest rates, and that's through purchasing of debt. I mean, $3 trillion in a few years. It seems like they're almost undershooting where this could actually get to. And I want to, before we talk about perhaps debt instruments and things like this a little bit, just really draw on what you said in regards to in the future, people will be able to hold things like Apple stock, Tesla, whatever it may be, and actually be able to transact in that. I remember a Peter Thiel clip that's it's an old clip. It's from 1998. And he
Wow,
spoke
yeah.
about the
That's definitely an
evolution.
old clip. Yeah.
He spoke, I have to say, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but he spoke about
No,
the
I'd love to
evolution
see it,
of money
yeah.
and how it would be exactly what you've just envisioned. He spoke about how actually um, money would be, it would, you could choose what you use as money. Value would essentially become money, not just fiat for convenience, because everything would be kind of made a lot more convenient. And I think that is truly the future we're looking at. And what that does for markets is unbelievable. But certainly what I can derive is the protocols and the companies that enable that. They're the unicorns of tomorrow.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, for a very, very long time, Ripple has talked about the internet of value. And I think
Yep.
it's because this insight has been understood by them for quite a long time. I owe a lot to the leadership at Ripple. I like the old CTO, Svan Thomas, was basically a mentor of mine throughout my whole first company. Chris Larson, the chairman, is an investor in Omni. I have, I was a student when I kind of got involved in the ecosystem and I was able to learn a lot. And so I'm like pretty grateful for the experiences that I was able to have because I think they have had a very long-term oriented view. I said that they're expanding past payments into tokenization now. The XRP ledger has had tokenization functionality, I think, since day one with IOUs and stuff. So they have been thinking about these things very, very deeply for, over a decade now.
Yeah. And if you think about, everyone talks about XRP perhaps being a bridge currency for fiat currencies. And there's every reason why that essentially can be the case. It just makes everything far more efficient. But actually, you don't need to stop at currencies. You don't need to stop at fiat currencies. They can enable the fluidity of value, I think, more broadly. And that's very, very exciting. We're talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets that can be put on chain and then seamlessly through various protocols um, sort of transmitted. And I think that this is just an unbelievably exciting future that probably 99% of the population have no idea is actually going on.
No, I totally agree. I think a lot of people his saying a number as large as $100 trillion sounds crazy, right? Like my brain effectively can't even process that amount of money. But when you kind of break down where that is going to come from, it's far more reasonable. So just one single type of asset, U.S. Treasury bills, that is $28 trillion in itself. And so we're kind of in the domain of tokenization, we're moving past the like initial stages here where we were tokenizing fiat currencies. Now we're tokenizing treasury bills. I believe there's $4 billion of this work today, and the addressable market there is 28 trillion. That's just one type of asset that we can tokenize. That's not even touching on corporate bonds or equities or international equities. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing that like a lot of people at this point don't understand how early we are in crypto. Feels like it's been around for a long time, but we just now are getting the first steps of regulatory clarity, and the technical side is now performant enough so that we can actually like reasonably improve the operating expenses of these different businesses. And so from my perspective, we've kind of taken this weird timeline where we bootstrap this technology with this casino, but now it's at a point where it actually really fundamentally can improve how businesses across the entire world are operating. Now I think we're like stepping into the like, okay, now crypto is actually going to consume the global financial system. That stage, I think, really it needed those two things. One, it needed to be performant, and two, it needed regulatory clarity, and both of those things are happening right now.
Yeah, and talking about regulatory clarity, we saw Brad come out and essentially talk about how the SEC case is over. I know there's still a few things that need to be worked out. I think that's not just a big win for Ripple, Brad, and Chris and the XRP community, but the entire industry. What's going on in America? I mean, I have to pinch myself multiple times a day with what I hear coming out of there. It's
Yeah.
it's just like it was a pipe dream at one point. Now it's a reality, and I think people like me and yourselves probably saw that early on, and um,
I mean,
perhaps our
I'll
opinion.
even
Yeah,
say I didn't see that early on. When I was founding this company with my co-founder, we the government was so hostile to crypto that we were like, look, we know that this technology is fundamentally good for individual people across the world. People deserve control over their money. So like we were aligned from a values perspective that this is good. But we did have a conversation like it's possible that like I don't know, Elizabeth Warren or somebody gets elected and we literally need to move out of the United States in order to continue building this company. And we had a discussion like, are we down to do that? And we both were like, we love America, but yeah, honestly, like this one of the highest leverage ways we can like push human society forward at this point in time. So if it comes to that, like we're willing to do it. That's a crazy thing to have to talk about though when you're just trying to build a company in the US. And so I to me it's almost disorienting seeing how favorable the new administration is to crypto because my entire career before this I have been building under like hostility. Like there's been like debanking experiences and stuff like this. So to me, I'm just like things are incredible right now. Like wow, I the government likes this stuff. Like the government is openly embracing it. So I didn't really see this coming, but I am super grateful that it's here now.
And that's why I love having conversations with people like yourself, Austin, is because if you look at sentiment, and it's not just we had consumer sentiment and all these kind of economic barometers come out over the past week or so, and people are quite pessimistic, and that's always typically the case when you enter a new presidential regime. Certainly for the first few months, if you look at how markets typically react, they don't do too well, or they're quite choppy typically within the first 3 months, and that's very explainable. But why I love having conversations like this is because that's consumer sentiment on the economy and perhaps their outlook for markets. And if you look at the cryptocurrency space, it's kind of in many ways an over exaggeration of what's happening in more traditional markets. There is definitely a correlation there. And sentiment right now is exceptionally low. People are fed up. People are annoyed because the casino perhaps isn't paying them out. But if you just listen back to the past 20 minutes of what we've been talking about, there's never been a better time to be in the cryptocurrency space. And there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur and try and harness this technology. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, completely. So I can say with complete confidence, in the 8 years I've worked in this industry, never have things structurally looked better. Like I'm saying, like the technology is there and the regulatory clarity is right around the corner. And so structurally, things have never looked better. Markets are crashing right now because of Trump's trade war. That's like nothing happened in crypto. It's not like we had another FTX that blew up and like everybody's doubting it or something. Like nothing like that happened. Just the incoming president kicked off a trade war. But most things commonly are easier or simpler than most people make them out to be. And so one way that I'm thinking about this is what's the market going to do in the next couple of years? Obviously, nobody can know for sure. But independent of this, I'm unfazed. Like I see the path forward. But what's likely to happen here in terms of behavior from the government that'll impact the economy? So right now, the conservatives in the U.S. control the presidency, the Senate, and the House. This is how Trump has been able to get so much done so quickly. And so he's going to do a lot to make sure that continues to be the case. I believe I can't remember if it's the Senate or the House, but midterms are coming up at the end of 2026, and it's going to take like about a year for the economy to recover from the downturn that it's on right now, and also to just get the like downturn out of people's minds. Trump is a pragmatic guy. He's obviously not going to just continue sinking the economy and then lose Republican control over parts of the government. And so, just that alone, it's like, okay, there are election cycles coming up here at the end of 2026. It's going to take like a year or so for like this to get out of people's heads and for the economy to start booming again. And so that's just kind of how I'm thinking about it. Obviously, not financial advice, but like it's pretty simple. It's like Trump, we all know Trump is a pragmatic guy. He knows he's crashing the market right now. Would he willingly crash the market and like lead himself to lose control of part of the government? No. Like obviously he's not going to do that. So I don't know. I'm not stressing at all. Even if I didn't see that right around the corner, I wouldn't be stressing. But like I think that especially, I do think that the markets are going to turn around. It's not going to happen tomorrow or next month, probably. Like we're going to have a down period here. But just seeing how Trump operates, I'm very like bullish over the like coming horizon here.
Yeah, because he does care about this stuff and he's been very vocal about that. And, we're far more, I think, optimistic. Markets love to overreact. And when there's an element of uncertainty, they'll just, it's protocol for your big hedge funds and people like that to kind of price that all in. And there's a variety of things. So we're far more bullish on kind of Trumponomics than I think many people are. I think everything you just said there is absolutely perfect and really aligns with our kind of view on things. I think oil is something that I think he's going to do a lot with, and energy generally. There's a whole host of things, and you can normalize what's happening right now by going right the way back to 1985 and looking at the first few months of every single post-inauguration period to typically April, May. You're going to have a choppy time because you've got a new regime. They're getting things done. They're doing things. And there's nothing different today. And when you normalize that, and unfortunately, crypto is a massive over-exaggeration of all that, you can see a bit of a future ahead of us. So I share similar opinions to you. I think the midterm things is a brilliant thing to bring up, and he does care about this stuff, and of course his popularity. One thing I want to touch on before we move on to Omni Network and kind of figure out where it fits into this picture that we're painting is we mentioned treasuries and what they're doing there, and the fact that Scott Bessent, David Sachs had said they're going to try and bring interest rates down with treasuries. And what's kind of happening right now is a lot of people point to the debt burden in the United States. And I think there can be an alleviation of that with the crypto markets tokenizing these treasuries and actually using them for payments, perhaps directly, like they're exploring with money market funds, or with backing them up for stable coins, kind of democratizing this market. What do you think? Because everyone that perhaps is very pessimistic talks about this debt collapse. Now, it's my opinion they're not going to allow that to happen. Why would they? If they have an option to prevent it. What role do you think crypto plays in all of this? Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think for a long time, people have a lot of the like Bitcoin energy has been governments will collapse and they're going to manage their finances terribly, and there will only be one alternative here, and it's going to be Bitcoin. And so I love Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an incredibly useful thing. I am like the fact that it was invented, I owe my entire career to in many ways, So Bitcoin has like a strong place like in my heart. Having said that, is it good for the world if the US government spirals into a debt burden, hits hyperinflation? No, it would be catastrophic, not only for the US, for the entire world. And so, at large, am I hopeful that governments will start managing their money better? Yeah, and I think the U.S. is starting to demonstrate that. Elon is coming in and doing the same thing that he did at Twitter and just firing a bunch of like unnecessary expenses that are going on right now. So, obviously, this combined with the trade war is causing the markets to collapse, but like that's because we were being too reckless with our finances. And so, to me, like I love this country. I believe that the like values that it's pushing for are good. Obviously, the US has like made mistakes in the past, and like there is like another side of history that like a lot of us Americans aren't really like taught. But at large, would I rather have the US be a leader throughout the world and more dominant than China? Absolutely, by a mile. And like that's really the alternative here. And so I actually think that in a weird enough way, as the government gets more responsible about its finances, we are going to see that flow positively into crypto. And like that's counterintuitive to a lot of the way that a lot of people have thought about this. So like, why am I making that statement? It's because the point that you're talking about, the debt burden, it's actually strongly linked to this. So it's about stable coins, really. So what's going to happen here is very clearly the U.S. administration at this point in time, a lot of these people are business people, and they're like pretty sharp. And so they see that Tether, I think it's the number 15th world's largest holder of U.S. Treasuries today. And so they see that by promoting the adoption of stable coins throughout the world, they're going to continually increase buy pressure on these treasuries. And that is like a fundamental, like if there's one fundamental variable that is important to the US government, it's the debt burden. And this is a way to like lower that debt burden. And so there's actually like very strong synergies between the like financial, like the well managed finances of the US government and the growth in crypto markets at this point in time, which is counterintuitive to how most people have thought about it for a while. But it's very clear at this point in time that the government also sees this opportunity.
It's ironic, I think, isn't it, in regards to, both of us, everybody here really owes a hell of a lot to Bitcoin. And it's one of the greatest mysteries of our time in regards
It
to,
really is. Yeah.
it's just a beautiful story. Every which way you look at it, And the conspiracies that come off of it are great to explore, but
Mhm.
whether it ever gets resolved or not is another question entirely. But it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that this industry started out as a combatant to the fiat systems and actually has probably ended up more enabling them than combating
Mhm.
them.
I do
Very
think
interesting.
that I think it will enable the next evolution of fiat systems at large, but simultaneously, what it's doing is it's providing immediately proximate alternatives. And so, the next stage of fiat currencies is digital stablecoins. That is like pretty clear at this point in time. The thing is, once you are using a digital stablecoin, immediately you can swap into one of these like sovereign assets that like is not issued by a government. And so, there are synergies in the short term here, but it's almost kind of precarious for governments like long term, because if they continue to inflate away the value of their fiat currencies, people are just going to swap into these assets that don't inflate away. And so, I think they'll keep each other in like balance, in a very healthy way over the like decades to come here.
Yeah, we need a free market element, and I think we're getting that with a lot of what's taking place right now. There's also optionality that's given to people. There's just so many. It's quite black and white with people who are either very against the kind of enabling or the evolution of the financial system because maybe it's contrary to where this industry came out of. But there's a kind of a coalition that I think is actually going to form a better world for everyone. And you mentioned at the start about just how impactful this technology is. One of the greatest statements going back to fundamentally what this technology does, I think I've ever heard, is that if we had a distributed ledger from the beginning of time, we would have a very different history today.
Yeah, we
And that's
would.
interesting.
We would. What history, what's the term? Like history is written by the winners. Like we can't see what really happened in a lot of these things, but like having ledgers like this, we can just see historically like what actually played out here. And that I think is like a very kind of like almost from a sociological perspective, like a pretty fascinating evolution in human society.
Yeah, crypto is very sort of philosophical. I think. I mean, you can attach a
I
hell of
guess
a lot
so,
to
yeah.
it. It's political, it's philosophical. One of the greatest things about it, I think, is it inspires people to think about everything and learn about things. You understand Bitcoin. There's that meme. What is the Federal Reserve? And then the second Google is how do I buy Bitcoin or something like that. And people figure out what money is. Then they figure out how markets work. And then they figure out, okay, let's see where this is all going. And they start to understand technology. Again, my background's in dentistry. I've had to become a technologist. And Egon, who's obviously behind the camera, has helped me out massively in that. So shout out to him on some of that. Let's get into Omni Network because
Okay.
we've covered a hell of a lot, and we could continue down some of these rabbit holes. But
Mhm.
there's many people out there that might be unfamiliar with Omni Network. Let's start off by explaining what Omni Network is,
Mhm.
and then we'll get into some of the problems that are being solved, the inspiration, what it is you're doing
Yeah.
more broadly, and how it fits into the puzzle.
Yeah, I think maybe it actually makes sense to start with the inspiration. And so, like I said, like uh, I have a history building with XRP Ledger. I have built in the Ethereum ecosystem. I built on Bitcoin. I think a lot of people tend to identify very strongly with like one specific asset, but honestly, I see them all bringing different things to the table. Like Bitcoin, even though it's like older and the technology is not nearly as good as some of these newer networks at this point, there's value in the sense that it's immutable. It is this thing, it's going to keep being this thing, and the certainty of that is very useful. XRP on the other side, the amount of like the fact that it was optimized for like speed and efficiency, and it has this like entity Ripple really driving adoption of it with financial institutions, that brings something to the table that's very different than Bitcoin and Ethereum. For a long time, people weren't able to like program on the XRP ledger, and that's still largely the case today. They do have like programs that can be run there, but it's not fully expressive like Ethereum is. And so Ethereum was able to bring in more of the engineering community. So that kind of like I have always held the belief, even before I started building on Interledger, I was like, it is going to be a multi-chain world, and they are all going to specialize in different things. So that at large and like zooming out, it's like all these systems are good for people. At the end of the day, like these are open, permissionless networks, and people deserve control of their own money. And so these are all bringing something different to the table. So that's kind of what my original motivation was for working on Interledger. It wasn't just like some specific blockchain. It was tying them all together. And so Omni in many ways really is the like evolution of the Interledger protocol. So the Interledger protocol, like I said, we scaled it to 10 billion payments before we sold it to Ripple. It was just payments though. And so like this thing was extremely performant, but it was limited just to the like transfer of money, so payments. Omni in many ways is like what Interledger was to payments, Omni is to finance at large. And so there's this like much wider financial system of like trading, lending, derivatives, all these different things. And Interledger wasn't expressive enough as a technology to encapsulate that. It really optimized specifically for payments. Omni instead can like support this wider financial system. So Omni can connect these different blockchains, let them talk to one another. But really, where we're going with this is I think a lot of people don't see this yet, but it feels extremely clear to me. We're getting to a point where using blockchains, being on chain, is just going to feel like being online. Like, you're not going to think about gas when you're making transactions. You're not even going to think about the like chain that is powering things behind the scenes. You're just going to be using the internet, and you're just going to happen to like accrue ownership over things as you're doing, and you're going to be able to pay different service providers more easily. That's where we're going. There's a few like technical things that we need to knock out from that. So like one is users can't think about chains. They shouldn't have to think about chains. Chains should be optimized for developers. Like I said, like XRP Ledger is like leaning heavily into financial institutions. Ethereum is leaning more heavily into like hobbyist developers. And so chain should be optimized for developers, and users should never have to think about chains, because like my mom has held crypto for many years, but anytime she moves it, she calls me and she freaks out because she like is scared of like doing something wrong. And so crypto as a technology is still largely inaccessible to a vast majority of people, specifically people who would benefit from it most. And so really the thesis here with Omni is like we need to let all these blockchains talk to each other and enable this wider financial system, but it doesn't stop there. Really, we have to build these layers on top so that people don't have to think about the chains. They don't have to think about gas tokens. They just use the internet, and money is just like a primitive within the internet itself. So that's kind of like how I think about Omni and like the direction that we're heading.
Wow. So we could almost think about Omni as an interface to access everything that the cryptocurrency space has to offer in almost a Web 2 manner. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Like that is the goal, that uh, people just aren't going to be excluded from this financial system because they're not, technically savvy enough. Anybody who can use the internet should be able to benefit from crypto, and Omni enables that.
Wow. And I've got so many examples myself. Certainly sending funds in the early days was a white
Yeah,
knuckle ride,
yeah,
especially if
for
it
sure.
turned up like 8 hours later and you're talking, thousands of pounds. It's like, okay. Or even
Mhm.
just, so many things in crypto is still so cumbersome. And I think this is a really great sort of product market fit here. Um, Practically, let's talk about how that's achieved. And that's quite
Mhm.
complex because there's a lot of moving parts to that. So, are you guys trying to sort of bridge the crypto space as a whole through connecting through bridges? What's the process of you actually connecting things together, first of all?
Yeah, it is very technical, but I think I can explain it in a non-technical, or at least a less technical way. And so uh, people who use Robinhood today, there's this design paradigm where you just open this application and you want to buy $100 of Apple stock. You click the button. You don't need to think about the New York Stock Exchange. You don't need to think about what type of order was placed. You don't need to think about any of that. You just have a nice simple application, and you click a button and you express your intent to acquire $100 of Apple stock. Um, Omni leverages this same paradigm, where we can provide a super simple experience. Like you said, this kind of like Web 2 user experience. And the way that we achieve that is the exact same way that Robinhood does. So when you click that buy $100 of Apple stock, somebody has to think about the exchange that is happening on, like what the entry price was, all these like technical things, but it's not the user. What they do is they actually have a deal with Citadel, where Citadel goes and does all the complicated things on their behalf. The problem with this, though, is that nobody really knows exactly what this relationship looks like. Actually, Citadel pays Robinhood for the right to do
Yep.
this, which feels
For
kind
the
of
order
weird,
flows.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, wait, why is like if they're providing the service to users, why is Citadel paying for the right to do that? So it's like understandably people are like, I don't understand how users are not getting screwed here. the really cool thing about the way that Omni works is specifically enabled by just blockchains at large. They're open and transparent. And so when a user says, like, I want to acquire $100 of treasury bills, they're not going to have to think about what chain that's on. They're not going to have to pay gas. They're just going to like make that statement, that intent. That's kind of the like technical word that people are using for this. And then what Omni facilitates is this auction that happens, like in a second, where a bunch of different hedge funds compete and say, like, hey, I want to fulfill this request. And then another one comes and says, actually, I want to fulfill this request and I'll outbid this other one to provide this for the user. So that's how it works. It's very similar to the Robinhood and Citadel relationship, except it's all open and transparent. And so this guarantees users that they're always going to be like served the best and get the best outcome. And I'm really excited about this because it's like an inversion on the way finance has operated historically. Many people obviously feel they're getting screwed over by like finance and like banks and financial institutions. Like I'm sure that's a sentiment that we can all resonate with. How like something happened, we're like, what? How did this even like? Yeah, we just feel screwed. This changes it so that when people are engaging with the financial system, they can state, I want this, and anybody across the world can come and compete to win the right to fulfill that intent for the user. And so that's how Omni actually works. It's basically just like a global auction for like users coming in, having a super simple experience saying, I want this. And then all these like smart, sophisticated hedge funds, market makers, etc., go and compete to provide the best rate for the user. They don't have to think about any of that. They just get the best rate. So that's kind of at a technical level what's actually happening with Omni.
Wow, that's fascinating, and I mean, you can really see the need for something like that. And then, I suppose there's a whole host of questions that come off the back end of that. Whereas if a user wants to use Omni, I'm going to need a wallet. I'm going to need somewhere to store these assets. Um, is that some? Of course, that's going to be something you guys are providing, or is it a case of you can hook up a wallet to the Omni protocol? Talk me through how a user actually. So we've looked at how these things are facilitated. Maybe talk me through me as a user coming to Omni protocol, buying an asset, getting filled in a free market fashion, which I think is brilliant because you're going to get the best cost on it if you've got competing parties, not just what we have in traditional finance, which is a very much a monopoly, and you get what you're given and you get it at this price, and the spreads are often huge, certainly on crypto actually. Um, Talk to me about the user and how they interact. We've spoke a little bit about that, but what they need to interact and how that works. They need an Omni wallet. They need a Web3 wallet generally to store things. How does this all work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate you for like bringing it down to reality. Like everything I just said, like cool, nice, and like utopian, great. Like if everything worked that way, but like, what does it look like to use it? And so the Robinhood and Citadel comparison, I think, helps people understand. But the thing is, we're not building a Robinhood application. What we are actually selling is this technology to applications like Robinhood, so that any application out there doesn't have to go build this network, aggregate across all these different networks, and do all the technical complexity there. They just have like a pretty nice, simple interface where they have the users and they can allow their users to state, I want this. So, super concrete example, kind of the first team that we're working with here. Um, we're taking a different like go to market strategy than a lot of crypto companies. A lot of crypto companies try to like have like tinier projects build on them and like build up their ecosystem. That's not what we're doing. Like our first customer is $1 billion protocol named Symbiotic. And so what does it look like when people are benefiting from Omni when they use Symbiotic? This protocol is on Ethereum L1, and all these sub networks, these rollups on Ethereum, can't use this protocol today. What they do is they integrate Omni's SDK and just makes it so they can accept deposits from all these different networks that are out there. And the user doesn't have to think about the fact that their money is on a different chain than where this protocol is at. And so that's kind of like stage one here, where we sell an SDK to developers so they can simply accept deposits from users that are on different chains. This is a huge problem today. It's really hard to grow a business in crypto because everybody has to deploy on one chain, and you can only access the users on that one chain. That's just obviously like a massive problem. And so the SDK that we're providing just makes it so that they can actually access the full market of users. Where this is going though is like we're not going to stop just at selling to like application developers. We're going to take this and like sell it to centralized exchanges. We're also going to sell it to like fintechs, and eventually we're going to sell it to banks so that everybody can just have direct access to this global on-chain economy and get the best rates for their users. That's kind of the product like roadmap of where we're going to head.
Wow. And where's Omni today? You know, you mentioned you've already enacting or taking on partners. By the way, I did a lot of looking into kind of how Omni came about. It was the biggest ever Binance launch pool protocol, which says a hell of a lot in regards to demand. And I looked at some of the backers, and I was just like, wow, you know, you got Coinbase, you got a hell of a lot of people there that see a hell of a lot in this project, and you can see why in regards to what we're talking about. Um, let's talk about where Omni is today, because if you're watching this, like myself, listening to you, Austin, you're going to be excited about this because there's every reason to be. It solves a real issue. In doing that, it lifts people up, creates more, et cetera, which is perfect. Where's Omni today? What stage is this protocol at?
Yeah. So I mean, we're still very early. Yeah, like it was the largest Binance launch pool ever, which was crazy. When that happened, we were like, wow, like I don't know, it was I don't know, affirming to see like people really believe in the problem that we're setting out to solve here. And so it is a hard problem to solve. It is very, I explained it in a way where I'm like using an analogy to like Robin Hood and Citadel. Behind the scenes, though, the amount of engineering work this takes is immense. And so we actually earlier today we just rolled out the first public example of how people can benefit from Omni, and so this turns something that would have taken 4 transactions across multiple chains into you just clicking a button. Users don't even need to think about gas. That's actually like we just rolled that out today for the first time. The first customer externally that we're working with, Symbiotic, we're going to be on testnet soon, and then mainnet like in the next few weeks, and then mainnet a few weeks after that. So right now we're really like we have put in work over like 2 years here to make this possible, and the very first example of this working live in production actually went out today, and then in the coming weeks here we're going to have our first examples of it working with $1 billion protocol. And so like I said, that's kind of how we think about go to market here. We're not trying to create a bunch of like hype with a bunch of tiny projects that are building on us to make it look like we have some ecosystem. We're pretty laser focused, especially compared to a lot of crypto companies, on are we solving a real problem here? And so the best way to do that is go talk to like really large scale teams that are really serious businesses and learn about like how they're thinking about this problem. And that's why we're going to market with like such large scale protocols. We're also talking, after we get the first $1 billion one over the line, we're already talking with a number of others that are like multi-billion-dollar protocols. So we're scaling up from there. But that's like the shorter term roadmap here. But yeah, honestly, we're at a really exciting point because it has taken so much engineering work to make this possible. And before I hopped in here, I actually tweeted like for the first time, this is happening live in production on mainnet today.
Wow, it's all very exciting. And talking about the shorter term, let's talk. We very much spoke about what the future looks like of finance, and the enabling or the leveling up that crypto brings to that. Let's talk about more longer term, how you see Omni Network, in 10, 15 years' time. Where do you see Omni Network, and how do you see it becoming a staple part of the sort of financial world, as it's going to become?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So 10 to 15 years from now, crypto moves so quickly that I think most people like don't understand how much people overestimate what's going to happen in 1 year, and they drastically underestimate what's going to happen in 10 to 15 years. And so we're going to move aggressively into like the traditional financial system is going to move on chain. Uh, and they're not going to do that because they're like grabbing onto hype and FOMO and stuff and speculation. That's not why. They're going to do it because it fundamentally improves the operating expenses of their businesses. So there's a reason that like, Larry Fink is going on CNBC and saying, I want the US government to approve the tokenization of bonds and stocks today. Like he's doing that because it's actually incredibly expensive to run his business without a blockchain. And so in the next 10 to 15 years, the global financial system is going to move on chain, but it's going to be incredibly complex. Like if you want to go do a specific thing on a blockchain as an end user, you're going to need to be like an engineer, and that's fine. Like the real goal here is making this technology accessible to people. Like we're talking live over a video chat with one another, and we're not thinking about whether it's getting routed through AWS or Google Cloud or any of this. We really just have this incredible tool through which we can talk with each other. And so that's really the gap that Omni is going to fill. It's going to like be the bridge between all this incredible all these incredible products and this financial system moving on chain, and just be this massive like aggregation and simplification layer that allows everyday users to just be like, I want to take out a loan. who is going to give me across the entire world, who is going to give me the best loan. We're no longer going to be like dependent upon a bank to provide us those financial services. We're going to, like through Omni, be able to make a statement. We're going to put out our intent to the world. I want a loan. And anybody across the entire world is going to be able to come and compete and offer you the best rates for that loan. So that's really on a 10 to 15 year time frame where Omni will be. The thing is, you won't have to think about it. Just like we're not thinking about DNS, TCP, IP, or any of these things behind the scenes. It's just going to be the simplification layer through which users can say, I want this to happen in the financial world. And Omni is going to go acquire the best rate for you.
Wow, it truly is amazing. I mean, if you think about the internet, for example, and the largest companies today that sort of got on board with that revolution, really what they did was match customers through the internet with issues, problems that needed to be solved, or solutions, I should say, not problems. And that essentially is what Omni Network is doing. And I think that's exceptionally exciting. I am mindful of time, Austin. Um, what I really want to do is direct people to where they can find out more about Omni Network. Obviously, we're going to leave links to your Twitter. We'll leave links to Omni Network's or X account, as I should say. I still call it Twitter. Do you?
Same, yeah.
All the time. But we'll
Yeah.
leave links to as much possible resources as we can. Of course, Omni's website, Austin's Twitter, the Omni's Twitter account as well. Where would you like to direct people if they want to learn more about Omni after
Mhm.
watching this?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so we run our team in a very different way compared to a lot of crypto companies. We're far more lean than a lot of people would imagine we are. We don't have like a big marketing team or something. We literally have 2 people on marketing right now, whereas a lot of teams at our stage have like 15 people on marketing. And honestly, a lot of that comes downstream of us, one, just being like very financially responsible, not wasting money, like having built through multiple cycles. Like, I just know, the number one thing you need to do is just make sure you can survive the downturns. So actually the way that we've been communicating with the community largely is just through my account. I just share very transparently where we're at, and I'm pretty active on Twitter. So the best places to learn like the latest with what's happening on Omni is my personal account on Twitter. So like 0xASK is my handle. And then we also have the like main account, which is Omni FDN, like foundation. But the thing is here is that I don't think people care as much about like updates coming from the like primary like main account because it's like this thing happened. Whereas on mine, I can be more expressive about like this is why we designed it this way, or like oh this is like I just talked with like this morning a member from the engineering team on the Ripple stablecoin team came through. Here's some like interesting insights. And so honestly, probably the best way to like stay up to date with Omni is follow me on Twitter and also join our Discord. I'm pretty active in our Discord as well, and the community is pretty active at this point. So, yeah, those are the best places.
We are going to leave links to all of that in the description. Austin, you've got an open invitation to come on this show whenever you want. I could honestly talk to you all day long. Um,
Yeah, would love to come back someday.
we've always got to be careful when you get 2 people like me and you in a room because we can end up
Yeah.
talking about things for hours and hours, and often it can be totally around what we initially intended to talk about.
Well,
But I think we've done a very good job of keeping things on track, and we'd
yeah,
love to get you back on the show for sure.
yeah. I appreciate one kind of final call to action I'll throw out there. If people were more interested in the kind of like abstract evolution of money side of things, there's a book that I read called The Ascent of Money by Niall Ferguson. It's like Niall, like Neil Ferguson, maybe. Anyway, it's fascinating and it really shows you like a history of how finance and money has evolved and how that's impacted civilization. This was really important for me in understanding like, oh, money is so much more important than just paying for things. Really, it is like guided like the global superpowers at the time. So if you want to go like a deep dive on things, that's one book I would highly recommend to anybody that checked this out. And tweet at me your thoughts if you end up reading it. Would love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Austin, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. We look forward to having you back on, and thank you very much for being here today.
No, thank you, man. Appreciate you bringing me on. It's fun.